The Los Angeles Lakers, the defending NBA champions. They are officially the 7th seed. And here to talk about the defending champions and their season is longtime Lakers fan Chuck Oshurak, talking about the Lakers.
Thanks, Earl. Glad to be here.
The first thing I want to ask you, what led to you becoming a Lakers fan and what drew you to them particularly?
So I'm born and raised in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. So obviously we don't have an NBA franchise. Grown up in the 80s, I was a tall kid. I graduated high school probably $140. So you put any tall kid on the basketball court, the coach is going to want to put them down low. And I just got the slop beat out of me. So here I was, a scrawny little screen bean out there, and this guard came out, Magic Johnson. Taller point guard, play outside, got everybody involved. And I looked at that and I said, you know what? I like how that guy plays. Plus, he doesn't get the slop beat out of him underneath like everybody else's size. So from back in the early to mid 80s, I jumped on the Showtime train, and I've been a Laker fan ever since.
Looking at the number of memorable moments as a Lakers fan, if you had to narrow it down to one, which is the one that stands out the most?
It's tough to take it down to one, Earl. I would probably say against Portland in the 2000 Game 7 Western Conference Finals. If you think back, LA jumped out to a big 3-1 lead in the series. They lost Game 5. They lost Game 6. They were down 20 in Game 7. And the Lakers come roaring back. And with about 40 seconds left, they're up 4. Kobe drives down the middle of the lane. Shaq goes backdoor on the right wing. And Kobe puts it up there, and Shaq throws it down for a 6-point lead, and the rest is history. So it's difficult to narrow it down to one, but that's probably the one that I remember the most.
What would you say is your most unique piece of Lakers memorabilia that you have?
Again, that's tough to narrow it down to one. I'm a big card and memorabilia collector. So I have a Kobe rookie, I have a Shaq rookie, Magic rookie. I love all of those. I have an autographed Kobe mini basketball and an autographed Magic Johnson basketball. So those two are probably at the top of my list.
Going into the season, what were the expectations, especially being the defending champions out of the bubble and a 72-game regular season? What were you hoping for the Lakers to do?
I mean, as a Laker fan, is there really any other answer regardless of the year? You were planning on winning a championship that year. I mean, if your aspirations are to make the playoffs, no, you're a Jazz fan. So, I mean, as a Laker fan, you are expecting to win a championship or at least compete for a championship every year. And coming out of last year, I don't think that is any different.
Looking at everything and seeing they got out to such a hot start, I guess there were no doubts at all that, hey, these guys are going to make the playoffs. So, I mean, throwing that out of the window, were you concerned at any point, especially following the injuries, that they might have slipped all the way out of the playoff race, not even just to the 7 to 10 spot, but out of the playoffs in general?
Well, I mean, think about it. They had to win 5 in a row to get back up into the 7 spot. So I'd be lying if I was saying that I wasn't concerned at all. Especially Schroeder was on the shelf. You had Davis on the shelf, LeBron. I don't think I ever went complete Chicken Little. The sky is falling. But of course, yeah, if they don't win those 5, who knows where they are? And I think any team that was fighting to get into the play-in tournament, yeah, they had to have had some concern.
Looking at the playoffs itself, who in particular do you feel the Lakers match up the best with? Who are you hoping that the Lakers can exploit their matchup with, even though the brackets are sort of already set? Who are you looking forward to seeing in the playoffs?
So I'm going to answer based upon last night's game, and then I'm going to expect you probably to push me a little bit more. Who do I want to face, or who am I afraid of in general? I'm not afraid of any team, but based upon last night, I'm afraid of every team. You take a look at it, injuries are going to be key, keeping this team healthy. But at the end of the day, you have a defending champion that has 2 of the best 7 players in the league on their team. You are led by a player that has been to the NBA Finals 9 of the last 10 years, and I think is easily one of the top 5 players of all time, just to keep the argument out there. So I look at the East and the West, and I could see them beating every team. I could see them losing to anybody on any given night. From a true matchup perspective, I think if you look at last night, this team needs to go back and play more of a small ball with Davis at the 5. And so I like any matchup that is going to give them an edge there. So I kind of take a look at it. Jazz have had a great season. I like Davis against Gobert in that situation. I'm not really worried about Phoenix. Again, great year with Paul coming over. I would be really nervous of a Denver team if they were healthy right now. And I think even with them not being healthy, Denver is a team to be worried about. And I think we have to be worried about our little brother. I mean, the Clippers are here to stay, and we pushed them in the sand for enough years. Eventually, you have to expect them to come out fighting and win. So I would say the Clippers and even Denver. And based upon last night, I would not want to face Golden State again. You take a look at what that team has done. I don't care where they are with Green and Curry. They play together better than most any duo out there.
And looking at LeBron, going into the Lakers' history, who would you say is the greatest Laker of all time? Because I know there's plenty of debates there. And some people will say it'll extend outside of the court and into the front office too, which would put Jerry West up there as well. But to you, in your mind, who is the greatest Laker of all time?
So I take a look at that question. I think it's a great question. I think if you just look at on the court, Kobe has every right to be in that discussion. I take a look at kind of what the players have done after their career for the community, for the franchise. I think it really then puts West and Magic up there over top. And I'm going to go with Magic. I am biased. He is my favorite sports player of all time. I think it's difficult to think of if you name a franchise at random that more people aren't going to think about Magic other than maybe that are people that were born after the year 2000. I think he is the franchise and made them who they are today.
You know, and I've always think about this because I look at Kareem and I just think, you know, that is a tough choice too. And I know that he technically could be the choice of the greatest player for two teams. He still leads Milwaukee scoring, and he was only there for like 5 or 6 years. But that's why I always think Kareem too, just because while Magic added the pizzazz, I think Kareem was a focal part of Showtime as well. And even before it got to Showtime.
And that's an interesting point because obviously I think of Kareem. I think it would be interesting if we got the airplane version of Kareem throughout his career with a little bit of personality, a little bit of swagger, to see how he would be viewed in the public. I mean, a great player, but I just don't think he stood out in a manner that the other Laker greats have.
It's sort of like a Duncan-like charisma, solid player, lunch bell player, will go to work, but it's just like you said, Magic, he walks into a room. It's like him and Shaq. Those are two guys that have that smile and everybody glows, which is weird because I think the Kobe thing with the charisma, it's like Jordan without the charisma. It's the one thing that I see when I see Kobe, and it's just the commercials Jordan did and all this other stuff. And it's just Kobe did everything on the court, but the personality was...
It was an intensity. I don't know if you've ever watched interviews with Kobe, but I've watched a couple, and he talks about whenever he was playing Summer League and he was 11 years old and he played in the Philly Summer League with all kids his age, went the entire summer and did not score a point. And at the age of 11 or 12, developed a plan on how to get better for the next summer. I don't know about you. I was playing in the sandbox, maybe playing some street hockey. Yeah, I was shooting some hoops. I was not developing a training regimen on how to go to the left at the age of 12. I mean, there was just an intensity, and he took it away from basketball. I mean, you take a look at what he did with books and movies and his entrepreneurship. I mean, he was a great person, a great role model for so many individuals. I think a lot of individuals can kind of learn from that Mamba mentality and take away from that a little bit.
Yeah, he was definitely focused. No one can ever take away his focus. It's just everyone's thinking, man, if he was like people wanted to, I guess, to be a little more personable and things like that. It was sort of like the Kareem and Magic thing in reverse with him and Shaq, where it's like you have the guy, the personality, and then you have the other guy who's ready to work, but let his game do the talking for him.
And Kobe is on record that he didn't understand why so many players would go vacation with other players and with players on other teams. And another good Kobe story, at least in my opinion, Jason Williams came into the practice facility, and Kobe was already on the other end of the court, drenched. And they were playing that night. And Jason Williams talks about how he's getting laced up and looking down at the other end. And Kobe is going full speed. And if anybody out there has ever practiced, whether it be golf, whether it be baseball, whether it be basketball, it is real easy to just walk through the motions. And here Kobe is going full speed with his drills on the day of a game. Williams goes out there. Apparently, he practices for like an hour, 2 hours, comes over, sits down for a little bit. Kobe's still going at it, goes back to the sauna, goes back and gets cleaned up, comes out. Kobe's still at it. After the game, Williams comes over to him and goes, Kobe, it was a game day. What were you thinking? He looks at him and said, I knew you were down there. I wanted to make sure that you knew that you would never outwork me. And here's this one point, not even one of the best point guards in the league at that time. And he was going to make sure that he knew that Kobe had his number. I mean, you just kind of look at so many of the stories like that. There was an intensity to Kobe that maybe him and Jordan, I don't know, Tiger, if you want to bring in players from outside basketball, but there was just a competitive intensity that I wouldn't even wanted to play ping pong against Kobe.
Yeah, competitive fire is something that probably couldn't be matched. I mean, it's easy for Jordan to do that because he's beating everybody. He'll play golf with Barkley and everybody else and like, oh, it's fine because he's got their number and he's beaten them on the court numerous times. But, I can definitely see that, for Kobe, it was nonstop work. And I think with Jordan, it was like work hard, play hard a little. And Kobe was able to work hard and then keep working hard, but then spend time with his family. So I think that's always a big thing. And it would have been interesting just to see what the future had in store for him.
I think it's odd to say, but I think most people will remember where they found out that Kobe passed away. I mean, I think that's one of those moments that you specifically remember where, how you found out. So yeah, I would agree with that.
Looking at the NBA Finals, who do you have coming out of the West? Who do you have coming out of the East? Who wins and in how many games?
So I'm going to say coming out of the West, I'll throw a teaser out there and say there's a team that will come from LA out of the West. And then I'll transition over to the East and say I think the East is going to be tough. I think it's difficult to pick against the Nets, but I'm going to go with Philadelphia. I know there are a lot of holes that you can poke in Philly, but I'm a big believer that defense wins championships. I'm a big believer that defense doesn't go cold. I think the Nets are going to have difficulty playing together. I think one of the disadvantages that Nets team has is unlike most big threes, you have three players there that are used to having the ball in their hands. Most other of the big superstar teams have somebody that is really comfortable playing off ball, if not two players. And I think it's kind of the infamous, if you have three quarterbacks, you really don't have one. I think at points that's going to come back and hurt the Nets. So I know they're a number one seed, but I still think that Philly is going to quote unquote surprise some people and be the team that comes out of the East. Coming out of the West, I'm going to say it is the Lakers. I kind of take a look at it and there are a lot of questions to this Lake Show team. I do think that the Clippers are going to give them a dogfight if and when they run into them. I know a lot of people are concerned about depth. I take a look at depth in the playoffs. I think with the extra days of rest, I think with the extra TV timeouts, I think playoff basketball is more conducive to a shorter rotation. And you tend to see that with most teams. So I think if you can keep Davis and James healthy, Schroeder, I think hopefully started to get his legs back. And I take a look at that bench, and between Kuzma, Matthews, Pope, I mentioned earlier, I really would like to see this team go small. So as much as I love how Drummond plays, I think he's the third center in this group right now. So I would like to see them play much more with Davis, have Montel actually sub on him a lot more. And I think they have the outside shooting that they can actually come out of the West and face off against Philly.
Who do you have winning and in how many games?
So I'm going to say the Lakers. Again, I know there are a lot of questions. I just think things can break for them. And I'm not going to go against an individual that's been in the finals 9 out of 10 years. I know his record in the finals, it leaves a lot to be excited about, but I would much rather be there and give them the chance. And I think they would beat Philly in 6.
What are ways people can reach out to you on social media just to talk a little bit of Lakers basketball and other sports? And do you have any shout outs or things you'd like to promote as well?
I would say you can reach me on Facebook. Chuck Oshurak is my name. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me. A very, very avid card and memorabilia collector. So whether it be sports, whether it be collectibles, please feel free to reach out and would be glad to talk.